The Parthenon is a former temple on the Athenian Acropolis, Greece, dedicated to the goddess Athena, whom the people of Athens considered their patron. Construction began in 447 BC when the Athenian Empire was at the peak of its power. It was completed in 438 BC, although decoration of the building continued until 432 BC. It is the most important surviving building of classical Greece, generally considered the zenith of the Doric order. Its decorative sculptures are considered some of the high points of Greek art. The Parthenon is regarded as an enduring symbol of ancient Greece, Athenian democracy and Western civilization, and one of the world's greatest cultural monuments. The Greek Ministry of Culture is currently carrying out a program of selective restoration and reconstruction to ensure the stability of the partially ruined structure. The Parthenon itself replaced an older temple of Athena, which historians call the pre-Parthenon or Older Parthenon, that was destroyed in the Persian invasion of 480 BC. The temple is archaeoastronomically aligned to the Hyades. While a sacred building dedicated to the city's patron goddess, the Parthenon was actually used primarily as a treasury. For a time, it served as the treasury of the Delian League, which later became the Athenian Empire. In the final decade of the 6th century AD, the Parthenon was converted into a Christian church dedicated to the Virgin Mary. After the Ottoman conquest, it was turned into a mosque in the early 1460s. On 26 September 1687, an Ottoman ammunition dump inside the building was ignited by Venetian bombardment. The resulting explosion severely damaged the Parthenon and its sculptures. From 1800 to 1803, Thomas Bruce, 7th Earl of Elgin, removed some of the surviving sculptures with the alleged permission of the Ottoman Empire. These sculptures, now known as the Elgin Marbles or the Parthenon Marbles, were sold in 1816 to the British Museum in London, where they are now displayed. Since 1983, the Greek government has been committed to the return of the sculptures to Greece. Etymology. The origin of the Parthenon's name is from the Greek word pi alpha rho theta epsilon nu omega nu, which referred to the unmarried women's apartments in a house, and in the Parthenon's case seems to have been used at first only for a particular room of the temple. It is debated which room this is and how the room acquired its name. The Liddell Scott Jones Greek-English lexicon states that this room was the western cellar of the Parthenon. Jamari D. Green holds that the Parthenon was the room in which the peplos presented to Athena at the Panathenaic festival was woven by the Euryphoroi, a group of 4 young girls chosen to serve Athena each year. Christopher Pelling asserts that Athena Parthenos may have constituted a discrete cult of Athena, intimately connected with, but not identical to, that of Athena Polias. According to this theory, the name of the Parthenon means the temple of the Virgin Goddess, and refers to the cult of Athena Parthenos that was associated with the temple. The epithet Parthenos, whose origin is also unclear, meant maiden, girl, but also virgin, unmarried woman, and was especially used for Artemis, the goddess of wild animals, the hunt, and vegetation, and for Athena, the goddess of strategy and tactics, handicraft, and practical reason. It has also been suggested that the name of the temple alludes to the maidens, whose supreme sacrifice guaranteed the safety of the city. The first instance in which Parthenon definitely refers to the entire building is found in the writings of the 4th century BC orator Demosthenes. In 5th century building accounts, the structure is simply called Honaros. The architects Siktinos and Callicrates are said to have called the building Hekatompedos in their lost treatise on Athenian architecture, and, in the 4th century and later, the building was referred to as the Hekatompedos or the Hekatompton as well as the Parthenon. The 1st century AD writer Plutarch referred to the building as the Hekatompton Parthenon. Because the Parthenon was dedicated to the Greek goddess Athena, it has sometimes been referred to as the Temple of Minerva, the Roman name for Athena, particularly during the 19th century. Function. Although the Parthenon is architecturally a temple and is usually called so, it is not really one in the conventional sense of the word. A small shrine has been excavated within the building, on the site of an older sanctuary probably dedicated to Athena as a way to get closer to the goddess. But the Parthenon never hosted the cult of Athena Polias, patron of Athens. The cult image, which was bathed in the sea into which was presented the peplos, was an olive wood zoanon, located at an older altar on the northern side of the Acropolis. The colossal statue of Athena by Phidias was not related to any cult and is not known to have inspired any religious fervor. It did not seem to have any priestess, altar or cult name. According to Thucydides, Pericles once referred to the statue as a gold reserve, stressing that it contained 40 talents of pure gold and it was all removable. The Athenian statesman thus implies that the metal, obtained from contemporary coinage, could be used again without any impiety. The Parthenon should then be viewed as a grand setting for Phidias' votive statue rather than a cult site. It is said in many writings of the Greeks that there were many treasures stored inside the temple, such as Persian swords and small statue figures made of precious metals. Archaeologist Joan Breton Connolly has recently argued for the coherency of the Parthenon's sculptural program in presenting a succession of genealogical narratives that track Athenian identity back through the ages. From the birth of Athena, through cosmic and epic battles, to the final great event of the Athenian Bronze Age, the War of Erechteus and Eumolpus. She argues a pedagogical function for the Parthenon's sculptured decoration, one that establishes and perpetuates Athenian foundation myth, memory, values and identity. While some classicists, including Mary Beard, Peter Green, and Gary Wills have doubted or rejected Connolly's thesis, an increasing number of historians, archaeologists, and classical scholars support her work. They include J.J. Pollitt, Brunilda Ridgway, Nigel Spivey, Caroline Alexander, A.E. Stallings, Rebecca Neuberger Goldstein, Freeman Dyson, William Street, Claire, Donald Kagan, Gregory Nagy, and Angelos Chaniatis. Early history. An older Parthenon. The first endeavor to build a sanctuary for Athena Parthenos on the site of the present Parthenon was begun shortly after the Battle of Marathon upon a solid limestone foundation that extended and leveled the southern part of the Acropolis summit. This building replaced a hecatomton and would have stood beside the archaic temple dedicated to Athena Polias. The older or pre-Parthenon, as it is frequently referred to, was still under construction when the Persians sacked the city in 480 BC and razed the Acropolis. The existence of both the Proto-Parthenon and its destruction were known from Herodotus, and the drums of its columns were plainly visible built into the curtain wall north of the Erechtheum. Further physical evidence of this structure was revealed with the excavations of Panagiotis Kavadias of 1885–90. The findings of this dig allowed Wilhelm Dorpfeld, then director of the German Archaeological Institute, to assert that there existed a distinct substructure to the original Parthenon, called Parthenon I by Dorpfeld, not immediately below the present edifice as had been previously assumed. Dorpfeld's observation was that the 3 steps of the first Parthenon consisted of 2 steps of porous limestone, the same as the foundations, and a top step of Carrara limestone that was covered by the lowest step of the Periclean Parthenon. This platform was smaller and slightly to the north of the final Parthenon, indicating that it was built for a wholly different building, now completely covered over. This picture was somewhat complicated by the publication of the final report on the 1885–90 excavations, indicating that the substructure was contemporary with the Chaemonian walls, and implying a later date for the first temple. If the original Parthenon was indeed destroyed in 480, it invites the question of why the site was left to ruin for 33 years. One argument involves the oath sworn by the Greek allies before the Battle of Plataea in 479 BC declaring that the sanctuaries destroyed by the Persians would not be rebuilt, an oath from which the Athenians were only absolved with the Peace of Callias in 450. The mundane fact of the cost of reconstructing Athens after the Persian sack is at least as likely a cause. However, the excavations of Bert Hodghill led him to propose the existence of a second Parthenon, begun in the period of Kemon after 468 BC. Hill claimed that the Kara limestone step Dorpfeld thought was the highest of Parthenon I was in fact the lowest of the three steps of Parthenon, too, whose Stylobate dimensions Hill calculated at 23.51 by 66.888 meters. One difficulty in dating the Proto-Parthenon is that at the time of the 1885 excavation the archaeological method of seriation was not fully developed. The careless digging and refilling of the site led to a loss of much valuable information. An attempt to discuss and make sense of the potsherds found on the Acropolis came with the two-volume study by Gray and Langlotz published in 1925-33. This inspired American archaeologist William Bell Dinsmore to attempt to supply limiting dates for the temple platform and the five walls hidden under the re-terracing of the Acropolis. Dinsmore concluded that the latest possible date for Parthenon I was no earlier than 495 BC, contradicting the early date given by Dorpfeld. Further, Dinsmore denied that there were two proto-Parthenons, and held that the only pre-Periclean temple was what Dorpfeld referred to as Parthenon II. Dinsmore and Dorpfeld exchanged views in the American Journal of Archaeology in 1935. Present building in the mid-5th century BC, when the Athenian Acropolis became the seat of the Delian League and Athens was the greatest cultural center of its time. Pericles initiated an ambitious building project that lasted the entire second half of the century. The most important buildings visible on the Acropolis today, the Parthenon, the Propylaea, the Erectaion and the Temple of Athena Nike, were erected during this period. The Parthenon was built under the general supervision of the artist Phidias, who also had charge of the sculptural decoration. The architects Iktinos and Callicrates began their work in 447 BC, and the building was substantially completed by 432. But work on the decorations continued until at least 431. Some of the financial accounts for the Parthenon survive and show that the largest single expense was transporting the stone from Mount Pentelicus, about 16 kilometers from Athens, to the Acropolis. The funds were in part stolen by Pericles from the treasury of the Delian League, which was moved from the Pan-Hellenic sanctuary at Delos to the Acropolis in 454 BC. Architecture. The Parthenon is a peripteral octastyle Doric temple with Ionic architectural features. It stands on a platform or stylobate of 3 steps. In common with other Greek temples, it is of post and lintel construction and is surrounded by columns carrying an entablature. There are 8 columns at either end and 17 on the sides. There is a double row of columns at either end. The colonnade surrounds an inner masonry structure, the cellar, which is divided into 2 compartments. At either end of the building the gable is finished with a triangular pediment originally filled with sculpture. The columns are of the Doric order, with simple capitals, fluted shafts and no bases. Above the architrave of the entablature is a frieze of carved pictorial panels, separated by formal architectural triglyphs, typical of the Doric order. Around the cellar and across the lintels of the inner columns runs a continuous sculptured frieze in low relief. This element of the architecture is Ionic in style rather than Doric. Measured at the Stylobate, the dimensions of the base of the Parthenon are 69.5 by 30.9 meters. The cellar was 29.8 meters long by 19.2 meters wide, with internal colonnades in 2 tiers, structurally necessary to support the roof. On the exterior, the Doric columns measure 1.9 meters in diameter and are 10.4 meters high. The corner columns are slightly larger in diameter. The Parthenon had 46 outer columns and 23 inner columns in total, each column containing 20 flutes. The Stylobate has an upward curvature towards its center of 60 mm on the east and west ends, and of 110 mm on the sides. The roof was covered with large overlapping marble tiles known as imbrices and tegulae. The Parthenon is regarded as the finest example of Greek architecture. The temple, wrote John Julius Cooper, enjoys the reputation of being the most perfect Doric temple ever built. Even in antiquity, its architectural refinements were legendary, especially the subtle correspondence between the curvature of the Stylobate, the taper of the naos walls, and the entasis of the columns. Entasis refers to the slight diminution in diameter of the columns as they rise. Though the observable effect on the Parthenon is considerably more subtle than on earlier temples, the Stylobate is the platform on which the columns stand. As in many other classical Greek temples, it has a slight parabolic upward curvature intended to shed rainwater and reinforce the building against earthquakes. The columns might therefore be supposed to lean outwards, but they actually lean slightly inward, so that if they carried on, they would meet almost exactly a mile above the center of the Parthenon, since they are all the same height. The curvature of the outer Stylobate edge is transmitted to the architrave and roof above. All follow the rule of being built to delicate curves. Gorham Stevens observed when pointing out that, in addition, the west front was built at a slightly higher level than that of the east front. It is not universally agreed what the intended effect of these optical refinements was. They may serve as a sort of reverse optical illusion. As the Greeks may have been aware, two parallel lines appear to bow, or curve outward, when intersected by converging lines. In this case, the ceiling and floor of the temple may seem to bow in the presence of the surrounding angles of the building. Striving for perfection, the designers may have added these curves, compensating for the illusion by creating their own curves, thus negating this effect and allowing the temple to be seen as they intended. It is also suggested that it was to enliven what might have appeared an inert mass in the case of a building without curves. But the comparison ought to be, according to Smithsonian historian Evan Haddingham, with the Parthenon's more obviously curved predecessors than with her notional rectilinear temple. Some studies of the Acropolis, including the Parthenon, conclude that many of its proportions approximate the golden ratio. The Parthenon's facade, as well as elements of its facade and elsewhere, can be circumscribed by golden rectangles. This view that the golden ratio was employed in the design has been disputed in more recent studies.